This episode is brought to you by Fortuna, an IT consulting and staffing company. From contact centers to IT and managed staffing services, Fortuna helps businesses grow through simplicity. Learn more at gofortuna.com.
Well, welcome to the TechX Podcast, where the future of technology intersects with business. And excited to be with you today. I'm Seth Waters. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Fortuna, and I'm here with Merritt DeGraw, the brains behind our show. Merritt, good to be with you today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Before we jump into this new podcast, it's really a new conversation. Before we jump right in, I'd love for you to take a few minutes and talk about your past. You've been in technology for many years. You're now the Chief Technology Officer at Fortuna, but I'd like to just have you share about some of the story. What's your story? How have you gotten to where you are today?
It's been a journey. I started off in networking back in the day, when I was at Akamai Technologies. I actually interviewed before Akamai. And then, .com bust happened, moved into medical device, worked at a company called Nuvasive. They created the tools for minimal access spinal surgeries. And I was the head guy there, reporting directly to the CFO. And again, helped them kind of build innovative technologies for helping people, improve their outcomes from surgeries, from their spinal surgeries.
Wow, very interesting.
And then kind of moved into larger companies, worked at an education company. So that's where I met Jack, oddly enough. And so we were online education, for-profit education company, building a kind of a tracking solution for our students and such, and giving them, next generation education, right, again. And then moved into a little bit of defense / transportation areas when I was working at Cubic Technologies, doing a move to the cloud, basically. That's kind of my main reason I was hired there, and I started helping out with some DevOps conversations also, and that led me into consulting career that eventually I landed here. So.
Wow. So you've done a lot of things that have prepared you to be able to talk as an expert about a lot of different technologies.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned Jack, and Jack is the CEO at Fortuna, the company where you are the Chief Technology Officer right now, amongst a whole bunch of other things. As it is, we all have our hands in a lot of different projects,
Yes.
as you do. But what is your job and what is your role right now as the Chief Technology Officer at Fortuna? What does that encompass? What does that include for you?
Well, again, here I think it branches outside of the technology, the information technology space, right? And we go into more, dealing with things like hydrogen generation, green energy production, I guess I should say is probably a better way to say it. But also, moving into, innovative technologies like blockchain and Bitcoin, right? So I'm also a CTO at Planned Capacity, which is a Bitcoin mining company. I should say a demand response company, because it's not just Bitcoin mining, but it's being able to help manage the balance of the grid, right? Again, we're not actually producing power in this case, but for the most part, we're able to help them kind of plan accordingly. Think of like an online battery that we're able to shut down when they need the power, and then we continue back on when we're up and functioning again. So.
Wow. So you've got your hands in a lot of projects right now, a lot of moving pieces.
Yes. IoT stuff with, manufacturing stuff, again, distribution area stuff. I mean, we're having conversations all over the place where we may be manufacturing ourselves here pretty soon. So There's a lot of moving parts at the moment.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into all that because there's so much to talk about right now, especially in the manufacturing and distribution space. So we're going to jump into technology and that in just a minute. But I'm really excited for this podcast. I'm really excited about the TechX Podcast because, over the next 12 months, we are going to be filming several series of these conversations talking about how technology is intersecting different areas of business. We're going to be talking about new space. We're going to be talking about healthcare. We're going to be jumping in today into manufacturing and distributing. We're also going to be talking about energy in a few months, and I'm very excited about that. So if you're tuning in for the first time today, don't disappear. Make sure you come back. There's going to be a lot of valuable information and really touching on how technology intersects with all of those areas and the emerging technology that's coming. And excited to get to glean from you a lot of understanding and information as we're moving forward as an expert in this area. Today we're going to start off by talking about manufacturing and distribution and where technology meets those. Now, as we jump into it, we've had many conversations over the last few months. This is an area of technology that seems to lag a little bit behind. Would you say that? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say it's a fair assessment. I think, many industries have the same challenges, but I think manufacturing and distribution in particular, I think some groups and some companies are ahead of the game, where other groups are behind the game, primarily just because, and we'll talk about it a little bit deeper later on, but there's definitely challenges in many organizations that we go into and we talk with. So
yeah, well, let's talk about some of the current trends and challenges in manufacturing and distribution today. Merritt, what would you say are some of the current trends that you are seeing in manufacturing and distribution today?
So a lot of automation, right? I think there's a lot of people, or I should say there's the vision of automation. I think there's some people know how to do it. I think, if you look at the Amazons of the world, they have, they've got that number right, I think, from an automation perspective. But then, again, some of the laggards are kind of, I wouldn't say laggards is probably not the right way, but I would say some of the people that are a little behind the curve are again, I think they're having people challenges, they're having technology challenges. Again, they're dealing with some legacy systems, some technical debt, if you want to call it, that is causing, a little bit of consternation.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges that companies in this space are dealing with? You mentioned, older systems and different things. What are some of the biggest challenges?
Well, I think people is a big, people process technology, right? I think those are the key areas. And I think many organizations that we've been in, they got people challenges, I should say, again, the knowledge of kind of automation, the knowledge around tying systems together to make it more kind of user-friendly, more easy to do business with, right? Those are areas where I find a lot of people have challenges. Many of the organizations that we go to have challenges in that area, not all, but some. And again, I think that is where, again, the people, I always focus on the people process technology areas, because again, the technology itself is not as, it'll be solved if you solve the people and process technology, the people and process side of the puzzle. So
that's really interesting. How is technology reshaping the manufacturing and distribution sector?
Well, I think if you look what is happening today, there's a heavy focus on machine learning and AI, right? I think those are the areas that are people that are kind of driving it. There's a lot of interest, I should say, in that industry, in those areas right now, in manufacturing and AI. Automation around, robots and cobots and those type of things, to where you're because people, again, we go back to the people conversation. Either people don't have the skills, or it's hard to find the people that have the skills. So what they've got to do is automate, right? So there's that risk, or that challenge that they have to overcome to get to a spot where they could actually meet demand, right? Because it's ultimately, and this is where I think the business comes into it, is you've got to be able to meet the demands of the organization.
Yeah, that's really good.
And so that is a challenge. Again, if you look at how fast things are changing in this marketplace and how things are changing in the industry in general across all verticals, I think it's like the wild, wild west. So people need to be able to keep up with that change.
Well, we're going to talk about that in the next episode, part 2 of this podcast, upskilling our employees, right? Really getting people trained for the emerging tech. But before we jump into that, what are some of the key technologies? You mentioned automation. What are some of the other key technologies that are driving change in manufacturing and distribution?
Well, again, automation is pretty broad, right? There's software automation, connecting to be able to automate connections to your vendors, to your suppliers, to your customers. Ultimately, I think it's a customer conversation, right? In my mind, if you look at the way like the Teslas of the world, that direct to consumer is actually starting to pick up in a lot of areas. So that whole, kind of distributor kind of model is, I'm not saying it's going away, but it's changing, right? And I think that's part of what's driving the conversations around automation, and kind of be able to drive the drive to speed to market, basically, is what it is, right? And again, whether you're talking distribution, which is a whole other conversation that it is on the, I don't say, again, I think that not going away, but again, causing challenges. Again, Amazon, if you look at the way Amazon does their market, right? They're one-stop shop. There's no more, this distributor, that distributor, right? As you deal with the old, kind of not the old school, but let's call it the older way of doing things, right?
Yeah. Talk to me more about that. That drive to get to market, that drive to go to market, that speed, that need. How are companies processing that right now? And what are some ideas that you think could be helpful in that process?
One is understanding the flow of how you get things done. A lot of times I find that the issue is not, kind of the systems that they have, but it's the steps that they take. They may not understand their processes fully. I find that a lot of times because a lot of these people didn't build it per se. Some did, some didn't.
Right.
But they don't quite fully understand the flow and where they have those hindrances, right? And those challenges or those speed bumps, if you want to call them that, to get the market faster. So really understanding how you one, develop the product, how you get it to market, or how you prep it for market, and then productize it, if you want to call it that way. And then what's the methodology to get it out in your customers' hands?
That's beautiful, Merritt. One question that comes to mind is, how do you ensure data security and protect against cyber threats in a digitally driven industry?
It's getting harder and harder nowadays, especially as, you look at all the breaches, you look at the ransomware that's out there today. A lot of, kind of what you have to build is that defense in depth. I think, this is a tried and true methodology that they talk about, defense in depth. And it's, it's been out there for a bit, but really understanding kind of, one, everything should be built with security in mind, right? Versus trying to, hey, I'm going to put whatever in place to make sure we're able to go from A to Z, right? I think a lot of it is making sure that, intent is given to security in everything that you do as part of your building process, whether it be software development or whether it be software that's on a machine, like on a let's just say a car, for instance, a Tesla. Yeah. If you look at, think about the danger associated with, if somebody has a breach on a car and somebody's able to control your car. You're talking life and death now, right? So ultimately, being able to build those mechanisms, like whether you're building software, to be able to deploy the software in a secure manner. A lot of people are pushing down the DevOps conversation now and to say a secure DevOps or DevSecOps, I think is what the term is now. But yeah, I think ultimately is build those mechanisms, build the controls in place and the governance over it to ensure, your checks and balances are there to ensure that you are secure as you move forward. Also, education is a big part of that conversation to say, I want to make sure that these people understand when they get an email from somebody that's outside that you don't click on the envelope, you don't click on the attachment, right? Yeah. Again, it's not an unexpected component, right? But ultimately, education is the key factor to try to, again, you want to mitigate as much as you possibly can and limit the amount of blast radius, if you want to call it there. Right. But ultimately, you want to, again, try to educate your people, get everybody on the same page, put the tools in place to be able to facilitate a capture if there is a breach, right?
Yeah. So. That's so good. So to bring it home, at the TechX Podcast, we like to bring it home. We like to bring it down to the road level. How do we get started with some traction in this? So for folks in the marketing for folks in the manufacturing and distribution industry, what are some good starting points? If you were to say an IT lead at one of these companies, or perhaps you're on the executive team and you're looking at bringing in security into your technology systems, where do you start?
Education, I think, is a big part of it, right? There's two areas, I think, right? One, I think a lot of IT folks don't understand how to quite pose the ask, right? I think that's one of the challenges that I had when I was at one of the places I was at, or at many of the places I was at. It was understanding how to make the right business argument to be able to help justify the expenditure, right? Because these are not small expenditures many times, right? So you're talking about transformational components, but ultimately is being able to understand is first start to look at what your business outcomes are and your objectives are. That's how I always start, is I look, hey, where do you want to go when you grow up as a company, right? From a business perspective. Then you start to say, okay, how are you going to get there, right? So you basically start to build out that roadmap based off of where you want to be Because usually, any organization usually has some sort of strategic planning conversation to say, hey, here are the elements that we need to attack this year to be successful.
Right.
There's also external elements that people are adding to that same strategy plan, that strat plan, right? So ultimately, you want to layer whatever department you're in. I don't care if you're in IT, whether you're in operations, whether you're in finance, legal, you name it. Ultimately, everybody's goals and objectives should lead into that conversation around where the strat plan is and where we want to go. And then ultimately, you got to say, okay, if you want to be here, you say you want to compete with Amazon or you want to compete with whoever. Ultimately, you need to be able to, one, have the people that are able to do that work to get you to that spot. Two, you have the processes in place to be able to make that happen. And then three, the technology. After you get the other first parts in, you layer in the technology as part of it, right? And again, you have to have the budget associated with it.
Right.
You have to have the shared vision, if you want to call it, and making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. Because many times I've seen, siloed organizations kind of work not on purpose, but work against each other because, again, either a lack of communication, a lack of transparency, whatever it is. But that's where I find most of the challenges are. It's not the implementation of technologies, but most of the time it's either budget or inadvertent mishaps, if you want to call it that.
That's good. Well, Merritt, this has been a great conversation, and I'm excited. I'm excited to dive into part 2 as we jump forward and learn more. As folks are walking away from this first episode, what are some key next steps for leaders in the manufacturing and distribution space? Walking away from this first episode, what are some things they can do, some key takeaways?
I think one, get better integrated with your business units. I'll take it from different perspectives, right? From an IT perspective, understand kind of, what your business is doing, how they're doing it, and branch into other areas. I think people have started to head this direction. Again, of the last, they talk about that business technology melding, right? And you see a lot of CIOs that are driving that direction. So whether they're not order takers, but they are helping to drive the business forward. Especially as you're starting to talk automation, you're starting to talk, robots and things cobots and robots in your ecosystem. But I think a lot of it is, one, educate yourself, two, get the others involved and start to really kind of together create that shared vision to drive those needles forward.
Wonderful. Well, in our next part of this episode, we are going to continue our conversation. We're going to talk about upskilling our employees and what that looks like to upskill our workers. We're going to talk more about leadership and leadership's role in technology development in manufacturing and distribution. In the meantime, if you have a question, maybe you've seen this and you have a question and you want to connect with Merritt, well, feel free to send us an email. You can reach out to us at techx@fortunabmc.com. Merritt, it's been great being with you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Fortuna, an IT consulting and staffing company. From contact centers to IT and managed staffing services, Fortuna helps businesses grow through simplicity. Learn more at gofortuna.com.